The explosion tore through the silence like a giant fist slamming into the desert. Sergeant Emily Carson didn't even hear the blast at first, she felt it. A violent shove against her chest, a shockwave rippling through her armor, sand erupting around her like the earth itself had rebelled. Then came the ringing, shrill and unforgiving, crowding her ears until all she could hear was her own heartbeat pounding like a hammer against her ribs. Carson! Carson, get down! The voice snapped her back. Private Ortiz was dragging her behind the rusted frame of a burnt-out Hilux truck, his eyes wide with the kind of fear only fresh recruits wore when they saw death up close. Emily shoved his hands away, squinting past the dust cloud to where the lead vehicle of their convoy had been, smoke, fire, and twisted steel. Screams cut through the haze, and she was already moving before anyone gave the order. The IED had hit the Humvee carrying Specialist Decker, their medic. And if Decker was down, that left Emily, the team's second-in-command, trained in combat life-saving but not a medic by trade, responsible for whoever was still alive in that wreck. Her boots hammered the ground, gear clattering as she sprinted through the acrid smoke, ducking instinctively when rounds cracked overhead. Small arms fire. That meant the explosion wasn't just an accident, it was bait. She skidded down beside the burning Humvee. The front half was mangled, the hood peeled back like a crushed can. Flames licked at the sky, black smoke choking her lungs. Through the haze, she spotted movement. Sergeant Rains, the driver, was slumped against the door frame, blood soaking the side of his face. Emily didn't think, she just reached in, burning her gloves as she grabbed his vest straps, hauling him out with a grunt that tore through her throat. "Hang on, Sarge, I got you," she muttered, half to him, half to herself. His dead weight dragged at her shoulders, but she yanked until his boots scraped the dirt. A bullet ricocheted off the Humvee's frame inches from her face. She threw herself down, pressing Rains behind the wreck as her rifle swung into her grip. "Contact! East Ridge," someone shouted behind her. Emily snapped up, sighted, and fired in quick, disciplined bursts. Figures darted between rocks about 200 meters out, AK barrels glinting in the sun. Her rounds sparked stone, forcing at least one to duck back. The enemy was trying to pin them while the fire cooked off what was left of their vehicle. Another scream tore her focus. Inside, Decker was still trapped. Emily didn't hesitate. She shoved her rifle into Ortiz's hands when he scrambled up beside her. "Cover me, Ortiz. Suppress that ridge. You'll burn alive in there. Now, Private." She plunged back into the smoke. The heat was suffocating, metal hissing and popping, ammo inside the Humvee starting to cook off with sharp cracks. Decker was in the rear seat, legs pinned under collapsed metal. His eyes locked on hers, blood running down his temple. Don't," he rasped. "Shut up. Breathe." She braced herself against the door frame and yanked with everything she had. The steel groaned but refused. Her lungs screamed for air, her body slick with sweat inside her armor. Another pop, louder this time, a round cooking off inches above. She ducked, cursing. "Think." She unclipped her combat knife, wedged it into the gap, and used it as a lever, straining until her muscles trembled. With a screech, the metal shifted just enough. She dropped the knife, hooked her arms under Decker's, and dragged. His scream cut into her chest like a blade, but his legs came free with a wet sound that told her the damage was bad, very bad. They tumbled backward out of the vehicle just as another explosion roared, the fuel tank finally catching. The blast wave slammed her into the dirt, ears ringing again. She blinked up at the sky, smoke curling into the blue, then felt Decker's shallow breaths rasping against her arm. "Ortiz," she shouted hoarsely. "Tourniquets. Both legs, now." The kid scrambled over, hands shaking as he dug into his kit. Emily steadied his grip, guiding him through the motions with clipped words. "Tighten. Twist. Secure." Decker's face was gray, his jaw clenched against pain, but when their eyes met, he gave her the faintest nod. Still here. Still fighting. Rounds kept snapping overhead. The rest of the squad was firing hard now, pushing back against the ambush. Emily forced herself up, rifle back in hand. She wasn't just Decker's lifeline, she was still second in command. "Ortiz, stay with him. Keep pressure." She sprinted to where Staff Sergeant Mitchell, their squad leader, was hunkered behind a berm with Corporal Davis. Mitchell's jaw was set tight, his radio crackling with static as he barked into it. "Alpha 2-2, this is Reaper 1. We are engaged, Grid, damn it, comms are trash. Carson. What's the status on Decker?" "Alive. Barely. Rains is out too, but breathing." Mitchell swore under his breath. They're trying to box us in. At least a dozen shooters on that ridge, maybe more circling south. We can't sit here. Then we hit back, Emily said, already checking her mags. Mitchell's eyes cut to her. That's not your call, Sergeant. She met his glare without flinching. With respect, sir, we wait here, we die. If we move, we've got a chance. For a moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by the rattle of gunfire. Then Mitchell gave a tight nod. Fine. You take Davis, flank left. Buy us breathing room. I'll hold here and get air on station. Don't get pinned. Emily slapped Davis's shoulder, and they darted off low, weaving between patches of cover. Adrenaline sharpened everything, the grit under her gloves, the rasp of her breath, the acrid tang of burning fuel still in her nose. Her mind flickered to Decker, Ortiz's terrified face, reins bleeding out. She forced the images down. Focus. They reached a low ridge parallel to the enemy's firing line. Davis dropped prone, rifle ready. Emily scanned, spotted two insurgents reloading behind a boulder, and signaled. They fired in unison. One dropped instantly. The other spun, trying to scramble away, but Emily's second burst caught him mid-step. More gunfire erupted as the enemy realized they'd been flanked. Bullets chewed the dirt around her. Emily rolled behind cover, cursing, then lobbed a frag toward the cluster of muzzle flashes. The explosion ripped through the rocks, silence following for half a beat before panicked shouting. They're shifting back. Davis yelled. Good. Keep pressure. They pushed harder, trading fire until the ridge grew quiet. Emily's chest heaved, sweat dripping into her eyes. She peeked up, the enemy was scattering, falling back deeper into the valley. Mitchell, this is Carson, she panted into her radio. Left flank clear. Ridge secure. Static crackled, then Mitchell's voice, copy. CAS inbound in 5 mics. Hold position. 5 minutes. Might as well be an eternity. But the enemy had pulled back, and her squad was alive. For now. Emily slid down beside Davis, her hands trembling now that the adrenaline was ebbing. She pulled her canteen, took a swallow, then forced her mind back to her soldiers. Decker. Rains. Ortiz. She jogged back toward the burning wreck. Ortiz looked up as she approached, face streaked with soot and sweat. His fading, Sergeant. I can't stop the bleeding. Emily knelt, pressing her hand against Decker's shoulder. His eyes fluttered open, glazed with pain. You're not dying here, Doc, she told him firmly, even if she wasn't sure she believed it. Air's coming. Just hold on. His lips twitched, maybe a smile, maybe just another grimace. You, bossy, as hell. Emily swallowed the lump in her throat. She wasn't going to let him go. Not here, not like this. Minutes later, the roar of jets cut across the sky. Emily tilted her head, relief flooding her chest as F-16 screamed overhead. Moments later, thunder rolled across the valley as precision bombs tore into the fleeing insurgents' fallback positions. Dust plumes rose like fists, the earth shaking beneath them. The ambush was broken. But the aftermath wasn't victory, it was triage. The medevac bird touched down in a cloud of dust, rotors hammering, and Emily and Ortiz rushed Decker and Rains aboard. Emily gripped Decker's hand until the medic shoved her back, yelling for space. She stepped away reluctantly, watching as the helicopter lifted off, carrying her brothers in arms into the fading sky. When the dust settled, Emily stood in the wreckage of the convoy, weapons slung, heart heavy. The squad was silent, each soldier wearing the same hollow look. They were alive, but at a cost. Mitchell walked over, his face drawn. You did good, Carson. You kept us in the fight. Emily didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the smoke still curling from the destroyed Humvee. In her chest, something hardened, a resolve she hadn't felt before. She'd saved lives today. But she'd also taken them. And the line between the two had never felt thinner. That night, under a cold desert sky, Emily lay awake listening to the distant rumble of artillery. She replayed every decision, every pull of the trigger, every scream. She told herself she'd done what she had to. That it was war, and war demanded choices. But when she closed her eyes, all she saw was Decker's blood on her hands, and the faces of men she'd killed staring back through the smoke. And she knew, with bone-deep certainty, this was only the beginning. The desert was silent again, too silent, as if it wanted to erase the violence that had unfolded only hours earlier. But silence never fooled soldiers. Silence was a mask. Behind it, danger always lurked. Sergeant Emily Carson leaned against the charred remains of the Humvee, her rifle across her lap, helmet pushed back slightly to feel the sting of night air on her sweat-soaked skin. The stars above stretched endless, sharp as broken glass against the black. They reminded her of home in Kansas, wide skies and endless plains. Except home never smelled like burned fuel, coppery blood, and cordite. Around her, the squad moved like ghosts. Corporal Davis patrolled the perimeter, boots crunching softly over gravel. Ortiz sat nearby, hugging his rifle like a life preserver, eyes wide and sleepless. Mitchell hunched over the radio, a red glow from the device painting his lined face as he tried to reach command. Static, static, and more static, Mitchell muttered, smacking the handset. These valleys eat signal alive. Emily watched him, her mind ticking. We can't stay pinned here. They know we're wounded. They'll regroup. I know, Mitchell said, not looking up. His voice carried the weight of command, of exhaustion. Reaper company's pushing a QRF, but they're at least 2 hours out. We've got to hold until then. 2 hours. Emily's gut tightened. 2 hours was enough time for insurgents to bring more men, more explosives. Enough time for them to turn the valley into a kill zone. She checked her squad, her eyes resting on each face in turn. Davis was steady, a soldier, but worn thin. Ortiz was green, shaken from watching Decker bleed out, though the medic was still fighting for his life miles away. Mitchell looked carved from stone, but Emily knew stone cracked under too much pressure. She needed to keep them alive. All of them. Carson. Her head snapped up. Mitchell was standing over her now, expression unreadable. Walk with me. She rose, slinging her rifle, and followed him into the shadows cast by the wreck. The night hummed with crickets and the far-off thud of artillery, a constant reminder that the war stretched far beyond their firefight. Mitchell stopped, turned, and studied her in the dim light. You did good today. Good doesn't mean much when Deck is in surgery and Rains is half dead, she said flatly. Don't do that, Mitchell snapped. Don't weigh their lives on your shoulders alone. You acted. You saved them. That's the job. She crossed her arms, jaw tight. And what about the ones I killed? What about the kid with the AK who couldn't have been older than Ortiz? You ever think about them? Mitchell's silence stretched, broken only by the whisper of sand on the wind. Then, softly, every damn night. But if you think too hard about who's behind that trigger, you won't pull yours when you need to. And then it's your people in body bags. Emily looked away. She knew he was right. That didn't make it easier. Before she could answer, Davis's voice cut through the night. Movement. South Ridge. Both soldiers snapped alert, rifles up, adrenaline slamming into Emily like cold water. She and Mitchell sprinted back to the squad's huddle, dropping low behind cover. Eyes on, Carson, Davis whispered, pointing. Emily raised her scope. Shadows shifted against the pale ridge, silhouettes slipping along the rocks. She counted 6, maybe more. Too organized to be nomads. Insurgents. And they were probing, testing. They're circling, Emily breathed. Mitchell's voice was low, steady. Hold fire. Let's see what they want. The figures paused, watching from the ridge. Then, with eerie precision, one raised a flashlight and blinked it twice. A signal. Emily's stomach dropped. Moments later, the ridge to the east flared alive with gunfire. Traces ripped through the night, rounds sparking against their meager cover. Ortiz yelped, hugging the dirt as bullets shredded the burnt-out truck beside him. Contact left. Mitchell roared. Return fire. The night exploded into chaos. Emily fired until her shoulder bruised, sighting muzzle flashes, watching one silhouette drop, then another. Davis unleashed controlled bursts, shouting over the din. Ortiz fumbled but managed to spray suppressive fire, his fear turning into raw survival instinct. Still, the enemy pressed. Rounds whined inches overhead, and Emily felt the ground erupt beside her as an RPG slammed into the dirt, throwing shrapnel that nicked her cheek. We're pinned. Davis shouted. Mitchell slammed the radio again, cursing. QRF, this is Reaper 1. We are under heavy fire, grid coordinates, damn it, still no signal. Emily's mind raced. They couldn't win a straight firefight. Not this outnumbered. Not with their position exposed. They needed to change the rules. She crawled to Mitchell, gripping his arm. We have to move. Now. If we stay, they'll overrun us. Mitchell glared, teeth bared in the glow of traces. Move where, Carson? You want to march into their waiting arms? No. We flank. Use the ridge. Hit them where they don't expect. That's suicide. So is waiting here, she shot back. For a moment, rage and desperation burned between them. Then Mitchell exhaled sharply, nodding once. Fine. You take Davis. Swing wide, take their shooters off that ridge. Ortiz stays with me. Emily didn't waste a second. She grabbed Davis's shoulder. On me. Low and fast. They slithered through the dirt, bullets cracking overhead, until the ridge loomed dark before them. Emily's chest burned, every nerve screaming. They climbed, boots scraping rock, hearts pounding so loud she was sure the enemy would hear. At the top, they found themselves behind the insurgents. Emily froze, her breath caught. 6 fighters crouched along the ridge, AKs spitting fire down at her squad. None of them expected company from behind. She glanced at Davis. He nodded, grim and ready. Emily raised her rifle, sighted the nearest man, and squeezed. He dropped. Davis fired next, his target crumpling forward. Chaos erupted. The remaining insurgents spun in shock, torn between targets below and the sudden thunder behind them. Emily moved without thought, training and instinct fusing. Burst fire, shift, burst fire again. One lunged at her with a blade, but she sidestepped and slammed her rifle stock into his jaw, sending him tumbling over the ridge. When the last one fell, silence returned, broken only by the distant crack of sporadic gunfire below. Emily's hands shook as she reloaded, her chest heaving. She looked at Davis. You good? Better than them, he muttered, wiping blood from his cheek. They pressed forward, clearing the ridge, forcing the remaining attackers to retreat into the shadows. Finally, the gunfire ebbed. The squad sector fell quiet, smoke drifting on the night breeze. Emily and Davis returned to the others, sliding down the slope. Mitchell stood waiting, rifle slung, sweat streaking his dirt-stained face. Ortiz leaned against the wreck, chest rising in quick gasps, eyes still wide. You pulled it off, Mitchell said, his voice low but edged with something like respect. Emily didn't answer. Her body buzzed with exhaustion, her mind replaying each kill, each decision. She forced her breathing steady, but her hands wouldn't stop trembling. The night passed in tense silence. None of them slept. At dawn, the QRF finally arrived, armored vehicles rolling into the valley, guns bristling, soldiers pouring out to secure the perimeter. For the first time, Emily let herself sag against the truck, relief flooding her bones. They'd survived. But survival wasn't victory. Hours later, back at the forward operating base, Emily sat outside the makeshift medical tent, helmet in her lap, staring at the dirt. Inside, surgeons worked on Decker. She couldn't hear him, couldn't see him, but she imagined every sound, every cut of the scalpel. Mitchell approached, lowering himself beside her with a grunt. He lit a cigarette, the smoke curling in the hot air. He offered one. Emily shook her head. You'll take a bullet but not a smoke, he muttered. She gave a humorless smile. I pick my battles. For a while, they sat in silence. Then Mitchell said, Command's noticed you. Her head snapped toward him. What do you mean? You made calls yesterday and last night that saved lives. I didn't give those orders, you did. They're watching. Emily frowned. I'm just doing my job. Yeah, Mitchell said, exhaling smoke. That's what scares me. You're too good at it. Command's gonna want to push you harder. See how far you'll go. Before Emily could respond, the tent flap opened. A medic stepped out, his face tired but calm. Deck is stable. Lost both legs, but he's alive. Emily exhaled, shoulders sagging. Relief washed over her, quickly chased by guilt. Stable didn't mean whole. He'd never walk again. He'd carry this war for the rest of his life. Ortiz ran up then, face pale. Sergeant, there's someone asking for you. Navy SEALs. Emily blinked. What? Inside the command shack, 2 men waited. They weren't army, she knew it instantly. Their gear was darker, more streamlined. Their eyes carried the same weight she felt in her bones. Too much seen, too much done. One stepped forward, hand out. Chief Petty Officer Mason. We've heard about your work the past 48 hours. We could use someone like you. Emily hesitated before shaking his hand. His grip was firm, his stare unwavering. This isn't my first war zone, Mason said. We're running joint ops. Your name came up. Fast decisions. Cool under fire. A knack for saving lives and taking shots when it matters. That's rare. Emily felt the weight of his words settle on her like another rucksack. The squad, Decker, Mitchell's warning, it all churned in her head. I'm not a SEAL, she said finally. Not yet, Mason replied with a ghost of a smile. But we remember people who changed the fight. And Carson, you've already been remembered. The command shack smelled faintly of coffee, dust, and gun oil. Emily sat at the edge of a folding chair, helmet resting on the floor beside her boots, fingers tapping her thigh as the two SEALs studied her in silence. Chief Petty Officer Mason leaned back casually, but his eyes were sharp, assessing every flicker of expression. His partner, a tall man with a shaved head and arms covered in fading ink, remained stone still. He hadn't given a name yet. Mitchell stood in the corner, arms crossed, watching everything with the suspicion of a father whose daughter was being recruited for a fight she didn't ask for. You've been here less than a year, Mason finally said. Already you've taken point on more live-fire decisions than some platoon leaders. That ambush you turned last night? Not many sergeants would have pulled that off. Not many would have dared. Emily shrugged, trying to mask the knot tightening in her stomach. I did what I had to. We were cornered. Exactly, Mason said, leaning forward. You adapt. You move. You don't wait for someone else to write your orders in the sand. That's the difference between surviving and getting bagged. His words should have felt like praise. Instead, Emily felt the weight of them settle on her chest. She thought of Decker's pale face, the tourniquets cinched around what was left of his legs. Survival didn't come free. What do you want from me? She asked. Mason exchanged a glance with his silent partner. We're running joint operations out of this sector. High-value targets, sensitive missions, the kind that don't get written up in neat reports. We need soldiers embedded with us who can keep pace and won't fold when things get messy. Your CO approved us speaking with you. Emily blinked. Mitchell? She turned to him, her voice sharp. Mitchell's jaw flexed. Higher command signed off. I wasn't asked. Emily's chest tightened. They'd gone over his head. That meant they weren't just testing her, they were serious. Your army, Mason continued smoothly. You've got roots here. That's leverage we don't always have. But you've also shown the mindset we look for. You don't freeze. You don't break. You shift roles instantly, from lifesaver to fighter. That's rare. We remember people like that. His silent partner finally spoke, voice gravelly. We're not offering a badge or a trident. Just a seat on the truck. You can say no. But you say yes. He left the words hanging, heavy in the air. Emily stared at them, then at Mitchell. His eyes met hers, hard but not angry, warning, maybe even pleading. You think she's ready for your world? He asked the SEALs. She's already in it, Mason said simply. The silence stretched. Emily felt every beat of her heart, every memory of the last 48 hours pressing on her. Decker's blood. Rains's broken body. The faces of the men she'd shot in the dark. She thought of her squad, of Ortiz's frightened eyes, of Davis's exhausted nod. She thought of what Mitchell had told her, command was watching and they would keep pushing. If she said yes, she'd step off the path she'd known. If she said no, she might be condemning herself to more nights like the last one, waiting for death in a valley with no control. Her voice came out steady. I'll go. Mitchell's exhale was sharp, almost a curse, but he didn't stop her. Mason's lips quirked into something between a smile and a grim nod. Good. Wheels up at 0300. Pack light. You'll get the rest on the bird. They stood, nodded once, and left, shadows vanishing into the bright dust outside. Emily sat back, heart still pounding. Mitchell stared at her for a long moment before finally speaking. You don't know what you just signed up for. She met his eyes, her voice quiet but firm. Neither do they. The helicopter thundered over the desert hours later, its rotors slicing the pre-dawn silence. Emily sat wedged between Mason and the silent SEAL, who'd finally introduced himself only as Holt, gear strapped tight, rifle across her lap. The bird vibrated with power, a constant low roar rattling through her bones. She'd done dozens of flights before, but this one felt different. The men beside her weren't just soldiers, they were predators. Every move precise, efficient, a language she was only beginning to understand. She caught Holt studying her out of the corner of his eye, but his face gave away nothing. Mason leaned close so she could hear him over the roar. Target's a bomb maker. High value, slippery bastard. We've tracked him to a compound outside a village about 15 clicks north of here. Intel says he's got ties to 3 of the cells that hit us last week. We take him alive if we can. Dead if we can't. Emily nodded, keeping her face blank even as her pulse quickened. You're not here to be a passenger, Mason added. You watch our 6, you handle comms if we go down, and you make the calls if we're split. You get me? Yes, Chief. Holt finally spoke, voice low and sharp. Don't try to prove yourself. Just don't miss when it counts. Emily met his gaze evenly. I don't miss. The bird banked, the desert rolling out below in waves of shadow and silver under the moon. The LZ came fast, a patch of sand on the edge of a dry wadi. They touched down with a jolt, and the team spilled into the night, moving with ghost-like precision. Emily followed, every sense straining. The air was cool but heavy with dust, the silence so deep it pressed against her ears. The village loomed in the distance, squat mud brick houses crouched under the starlight. Beyond it, a compound ringed with walls of stacked stone. The seals moved like water, slipping from shadow to shadow, every motion deliberate. Emily matched their pace, her boots barely whispering against the sand. Her heart pounded, but her breathing stayed steady. They reached the edge of the compound wall. Mason raised a fist, halting the team. He tapped his radio twice, then pointed, 2 guards by the gate, rifles slung but eyes scanning. Holt moved first, sliding into position with the fluid grace of someone who'd done this 100 times. Emily covered him, sighting 1 guard through her optic. Mason's voice crackled in her earpiece. On my mark. The second stretched, yawning, his weapon hanging loose. That was the mark. 2 muffled shots. 2 bodies crumpled without sound. Emily's stomach tightened. Clean, clinical, efficient. No firefight. No chaos. Just life and death, switched off like a light. They slipped inside, hugging the wall. The compound was larger up close, shadows sprawling across a courtyard cluttered with barrels, crates, and an old generator humming faintly. Mason pointed Emily and Holt toward a low building on the left. Clear it. Fast. They moved in tandem, Emily covering the door while Holt checked the window. He signaled 2 inside. Emily nodded. Holt kicked the door, and they flowed in. 2 men sat at a table, cards in hand, eyes wide with shock as the door burst open. Holt fired before they could move, both slumping to the floor in a spray of blood. Emily's breath caught, but she didn't hesitate. She swept the corners, called, clear. Holt was already moving back out. No wasted motion. No hesitation. Emily followed, forcing her mind into focus. This wasn't a raid for show, this was elimination. They regrouped with Mason near the main house, a 2-story structure with shuttered windows and a heavy wooden door. Mason's hand flicked signals, stack up, breach. Emily took rear security, covering the courtyard as Mason, Holt, and the others prepared. The door blew inward with a muffled thump, and the team stormed inside. Gunfire erupted instantly, short, sharp bursts, shouts in a foreign tongue. Emily held her position, scanning the shadows outside, her nerves taut as a tripwire. Then, movement. A figure slipped along the far wall, rifle glinting in the faint light. Emily didn't think. She pivoted, fired. The man dropped, his weapon clattering. Contact down, courtyard, she called, steady voice masking her racing heart. Inside, the gunfire died. Mason's voice came over comms. Target secure. Package in hand. Seconds later, they emerged, dragging a man in his 40s, wrists bound, a bag over his head. His clothes were stained, his body wiry, his presence radiating something ugly. Emily's chest tightened. This was him, the bomb maker. The one who'd put IEDs in the ground, who'd torn Decker's legs away, who'd left soldiers screaming in the dust. Every muscle in her body screamed to pull the trigger, to end him right there. But she didn't move. Orders were orders. They hustled back to the wadi, the prisoner stumbling between them. The night was still, but Emily's instincts screamed wrong. Too quiet. Too easy. Her fears were confirmed when the first mortar round whistled down. Incoming. Holt roared. The explosion lit the desert, sand and fire spraying. Emily hit the ground, ears ringing, dust choking her lungs. Another blast thundered closer, the shockwave rolling through her chest. They've got the drop on us. Davis's voice wasn't here, but she heard it in her head. Memories of the ambush slammed back, the valley, the ridge. But this time, she wasn't pinned. Mason barked orders, the team scattering, dragging the prisoner. Move. Move. Emily scrambled to her feet, firing bursts toward the ridgeline where muzzle flashes bloomed. Figures swarmed the horizon, shouting, firing wildly. Carson, with me. Holt snapped, grabbing her arm. Together, they sprinted toward higher ground, weaving through the chaos. Her lungs burned, her rifle bucked, her body screamed, but her mind was calm, every thought sharp. This wasn't survival. This was war. She slid into position beside Holt, sighted, and fired, dropping two shadows that broke from the rocks. Holt lobbed a grenade, the blast carving silence into the night for a heartbeat. Below, Mason's voice thundered, "Bird inbound." 30 seconds. The helicopter's roar grew, slicing through the chaos. Emily fired until her magazine ran dry, then slammed in another, covering the team as they hauled the prisoner to the LZ. When the bird touched down, sand whipping, Emily and Holt sprinted down, diving into the open bay. The prisoner was shoved inside, the team piling after. The helicopter lifted, traces chasing them, the desert falling away. Emily leaned against the bulkhead, chest heaving, sweat streaking her dirt-caked face. Across from her, the prisoner sat bound, silent, faceless under the bag. Mason looked at her, then gave a single nod. Approval. Emily didn't return it. Her eyes stayed on the prisoner, her trigger finger twitching. She'd saved lives tonight. She'd killed again. And she'd spared the one man she wanted dead the most. But as the bird roared into the night, she knew something with icy certainty. This war wasn't just testing her. It was changing her. The dust storm had settled, but the silence it left behind was worse than the howling wind. Captain Elena Ramirez crouched low behind a jagged wall of stone, her M4 pressed close to her chest, ears straining for the faintest trace of movement. Her team fanned out behind her, every soldier alive to the danger, every breath measured. The village ahead looked abandoned at first glance, but Elena's gut told her otherwise. She'd been in too many places like this not to know when death was waiting just past the next doorway. Sergeant Holt came up beside her, helmet coated in a thin crust of sand. He whispered, tilting his head toward the crumbling mosque at the edge of town, "See that minaret?" She followed his gaze. The tower stood crooked, one side blown out by artillery long ago, but something about the shadow near the top rung wrong. Too still. Too deliberate. "Sniper perch," Elena muttered. "Exactly. Bastards probably waiting for us to step out of cover." She tapped her radio, low-voiced. "Eyes on the mosque tower. Possible sniper nest. No one expose themselves until we clear that angle." Corporal Jenkins, lying prone with the squad's long-range scope, adjusted his rifle. "I can't see inside the tower. Too dark." That was the problem. The enemy didn't need to be visible. They just needed patience. Elena had a decision to make. Push forward and risk her soldiers being picked off, or wait, giving insurgents time to reposition, to prepare, to vanish deeper into the maze of alleys. Neither option was clean. War never offered clean. "Ramirez," Holt said, voice edged with urgency, "we can't sit here. Every second we wait, they're digging in tighter." She nodded. He was right. But she also knew rushing would play straight into their hands. She remembered the last ambush in a different village, 2 years ago, 3 good soldiers lost because she'd let impatience dictate her choice. That ghost still whispered at night. This time, she refused to repeat the mistake. "Elijah," she called quietly. The SEAL sniper's head turned from his overwatch position. His calm eyes gave nothing away. "Think you can thread a shot from here?" He studied the angle, the minaret, the stone archway blocking half the view. Then he smirked faintly. "Wind's dead. Distance isn't bad. Yeah, I can try. But if he's tucked in deep, I'll need him to twitch." Elena inhaled slowly, already forming the bait plan. She turned to Jenkins. Flashbang. Low arc, right into that open doorway at the base. "We'll see if our ghost twitches." Jenkins's grin broke the tension like a crack of light. "On it." The grenade sailed smooth, arcing just right. It clinked against the stone, disappeared into shadow. A second later, the alley filled with a sharp blast of light and thunder. And there it was. The faintest glint, metal catching a shard of sun at the tower's lip. "Gotcha," Elijah whispered, and his rifle barked once. The glint vanished. A body slumped half out of the tower's window, tumbling in slow, ragged motion until it disappeared from sight. For a moment, no one breathed. Then Holt exhaled a curse. "Clean. Damn clean." Elena didn't smile. She couldn't, not yet. The shot saved them, but in her bones she knew it was only the beginning. "Move," she ordered. "Clear the village," methodical. "They wanted us here, and I want to know why." The squad advanced, every step a study in tension. The village smelled of dust and cooking oil, the faint trace of livestock long gone. Windows gaped like black sockets, alleys curled like question marks. Private Lewis kicked open a door and nearly gagged. "Oh." Elena stepped up, saw what froze him. Inside the one-room home, a table sat covered in maps, radios, and crates marked in Russian Cyrillic. Ammunition, explosives, and photographs, grainy surveillance shots of US patrols. Her chest tightened. This wasn't just an ambush site. It was a hub. A planning node. They've been watching us, Holt muttered, flipping through the photographs. For weeks. Elena picked up one picture. Her heart lurched. It showed her convoy from 3 days ago, clear as daylight. She was in the frame, face shadowed but identifiable. They knew we'd come here, she said. Her voice was flat, but her hands curled into fists. This whole thing, it's bigger than this village. Before Holt could answer, a crack of automatic fire ripped through the wall, splintering plaster. Jenkins went down with a scream, clutching his leg as blood poured between his fingers. Contact rear. Lewis shouted. Chaos erupted. Elena yanked Jenkins to cover, adrenaline burning her veins. Bullets hammered the door frame, and the air filled with dust and terror. Elijah, cover fire, she barked. The SEAL rolled to the doorway, calm as ever, his rifle spitting precise fury. 3 shots, 3 insurgents dropped in the alley. But more voices shouted from deeper within the maze. They're trying to box us in. Holt yelled over the noise. Elena's mind raced. They had wounded. They had no exit secured. And this wasn't random, it was orchestrated. Whoever ran this cell knew exactly how to trap them. Her gut twisted. If they didn't break the net now, they'd all be buried here. She keyed her radio. Command, this is Raven Actual. We've uncovered a hostile staging hub, heavy resistance. We need extraction priority, grid coordinates transmitting now. Static hissed. No answer. Holt cursed. Jammed. They're cutting us off. Elena's heart pounded. Decisions again. Every wrong move meant another body. Ramirez. Jenkins gasped from the floor, his face pale. Don't let me slow you down. Shut up, she snapped, forcing a bandage over his wound. You're not dying here, not today. His eyes flickered, grateful and pained. The squad dug in, trading fire through broken walls and shattered doorways. For every insurgent that fell, 2 more voices echoed in the alleys. It was like fighting shadows. Elijah leaned close during a lull, his voice low but urgent. They want you, Ramirez. Not just us. You. Look at the intel, we're not random targets. You've pissed off someone high up their chain. Her jaw tightened. She thought of the intercepted arms deal 2 months ago, the raid that gutted half a warlord's operation. She'd led that mission. Maybe this was payback. But she couldn't afford to dwell. Her men needed her now. Holt, she said, we're punching out. Northwest alley, smoke and move. Elijah, rear guard. Lewis, carry Jenkins. No arguments. Copy, Holt growled, determination in his eyes. They burst from the shattered home in a storm of fire and smoke grenades. The village lit up like a hornet's nest, insurgents firing wild into the haze. Elena's boots pounded the dirt, every sense screaming, every decision carving the line between life and death. A rocket slammed into the wall beside them, shrapnel biting her cheek. She staggered but didn't fall. They barreled down the alley, Jenkins groaning on Lewis's shoulder, Elijah coolly dropping targets as he ran. And then, out of the smoke ahead, figures appeared. U.S. uniforms. Rifles raised, signals flashing. Friendly. Friendly. Holt bellowed. The squad poured into the arms of a reinforcing unit, Delta operators who swept the alleys with practiced violence. The gunfire lessened, then faded, until only echoes remained. Elena bent over, chest heaving, blood dripping down her face. Around her, her men were alive. Shaken, bleeding, but alive. The Delta team leader strode up, lifting his visor. His eyes were hard. Captain Ramirez? You've stirred a hornet's nest. Command needs you back at FOB Hammer. Now. Her stomach knotted. She'd expected a debrief, but his tone carried something sharper. What's going on? She demanded. He didn't answer, only jerked his head toward the extraction trucks. As her squad limped aboard, Elena stared back at the ruined village. The photos, the intel, the trap, it all pointed to something larger, darker. And deep down, she knew this was only the opening move of a war that was no longer just about soldiers versus insurgents. It was personal. And they were coming for her. The ride back to FOB Hammer was anything but quiet. Dust rattled through the seams of the armored truck, mixing with the smell of blood and cordite. Sergeant Holt sat opposite Elena, face grim beneath a smear of grime, his hand never leaving Jenkins's shoulder. The wounded corporal drifted in and out of consciousness, muttering half-coherent apologies and curses, but Holt squeezed his arm each time. Lewis kept his rifle across his knees, eyes darting like a man still expecting another ambush. Elijah, the SEAL, looked like stone, though his gaze lingered on Elena more than once. She leaned back, helmet off, blood crusted on her cheek from the shrapnel. Her thoughts churned. The photographs in that village hadn't just been about patrols, they'd been about her. She'd seen her own silhouette captured, her convoy targeted, her presence singled out. That meant her enemies weren't only fighting America, they were fighting her. And whoever ran the net had resources, patience, and rage enough to craft an entire trap around it. The truck jolted hard as it crossed into the perimeter. Floodlights washed the convoy in pale blue, and the heavy gate clanged shut behind them. Soldiers moved briskly along the walls, tension radiating from every posture. Something was off. Elena knew the rhythm of a base, and this one was running faster than usual. The Delta team leader, Lieutenant Shaw, she now learned, waited for her as the truck doors swung open. His expression hadn't softened. "Captain Ramirez, with me." Holt bristled. "She's banged up, Lieutenant. At least let her hit med." "It's not optional," Shaw cut him off. Elena raised a hand. "It's fine, Holt. Get Jenkins to the medics. Keep the squad tight." She followed Shaw into the command building, her boots clicking on concrete, the air thick with heat and the metallic tang of electronics. Screens flickered in every room, maps dotted with red and green. Officers muttered over satellite feeds. The whole place hummed like a nest on edge. They reached the operations center. Inside, Colonel Wexler stood over a table covered in intelligence reports. His salt and pepper beard bristled, his eyes red from sleepless hours. He didn't look up when Elena entered. "You nearly got your team killed today, Captain." Her jaw tightened. "With respect, sir, I believe we uncovered a major staging hub. The intel there." "I've seen it," Wexler snapped, tossing a stack of photographs onto the table. Her own image stared up at her from the pile. "Do you know what this means?" Elena swallowed, steady. "It means someone's watching us closely." "Watching me?" "Damn right," Wexler said. He finally met her eyes. "The insurgent network you tore apart in Basra 2 months ago? You didn't just break their supply chain. You humiliated their leader in front of his allies. Abu Rahman hasn't forgotten. His declared blood debt." The name hit like a blade to the ribs. Abu Rahman. A shadow in the intelligence files, a ghost leader whose fingerprints were on half the bombings in the region. She'd read reports, but hearing his name in her context made her chest tighten. So the ambush wasn't random. It was personal. Silence hung heavy. Elijah leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, voice calm. "He's testing her. Wants to see if she cracks before he strikes harder." Wexler nodded reluctantly. "The SEAL's right. Ramirez, you're not just an officer anymore, you're a target. And he'll keep coming until one of you is dead." The words sank into her bones. A part of her wanted to deny it, to claim she was just one soldier among many. But she knew better. The photos, the trap, the timing, everything screamed of a hunter marking prey. "What do you want me to do, sir?" she asked quietly. Wexler's gaze hardened. "I want you to keep fighting. But understand this, every decision you make from here on carries double weight. Your squad will follow you into fire, but Abu Rahman will exploit any mistake to bury you, and them. You don't get the luxury of error anymore." The briefing ended, but the weight didn't lift. Elena stepped into the night air, breathing dust and diesel. Elijah followed, silent until they reached the edge of the motor pool. "You okay?" he asked finally. She let out a bitter laugh. "Define okay. You've got a death sentence hanging over your head. But you also have a chance to write the ending. Not many people get that clarity." His words weren't comforting, but they were steady. She nodded once. "Then I'll write it on my terms." The next 48 hours blurred into preparation. Intel teams dissected the village hall, tracing supply lines, intercepting chatter. Patterns emerged, weapons flowing through the mountains, couriers moving like shadows, Rahman's lieutenants circling closer to their stronghold. The net was there, waiting to be cut, if they had the guts to walk into it. Elena spent the time drilling her squad, sharpening edges dulled by exhaustion. Jenkins lay in the medical bay, his legs stitched and stabilized, frustration etched on his face as he begged to return. Holt kept the men steady, gruff humor masking his worry. Lewis trained harder than anyone, as if proving he belonged. And Elijah, though technically not hers, remained nearby, watchful, his sniper rifle never far. One night, as the desert wind howled outside the wire, Elena sat alone at the barracks table, maps spread before her. Her eyes traced the red lines of Raman's supply routes. Every path ended in the same place, a fortress carved into the mountains, unreachable by air without heavy losses. It was a kill zone, and anyone stupid enough to march there without a plan wouldn't march out. She rubbed her temples. The only way through was not brute force. It was precision. They had to strike hard, fast, cut out the brain before the body could thrash. Trouble sleeping? Elijah's voice cut through the silence. She looked up. He stood in the doorway, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Maps don't argue back, she said. He walked over, studying the lines. You're thinking too big. You don't need the whole fortress. You just need the artery. She frowned. The supply choke. Exactly. Take out his ability to move weapons, his ability to feed his men. He'll come to you, angry and reckless. Then you get your shot. The simplicity of it hit her like cold water. She'd been trying to outthink a ghost in his own lair. But maybe the key was forcing him into hers. She met Elijah's gaze. That could work. He shrugged. Of course it will. I don't miss. For the first time in days, Elena allowed herself the ghost of a smile. The next morning, Wexler approved the operation. They would infiltrate the supply route at its narrowest point, a canyon pass where convoys had no room to maneuver. Plant explosives, cut the artery, and vanish before Raman could react. Simple on paper. Deadly in execution. The squad moved out under moonlight, every step cloaked in silence. The desert stretched endless around them, stars sharp enough to cut. Elena led, night vision goggles painting the world in green. Behind her, Holt carried extra charges, Lewis checked the perimeter, and Elijah ghosted along the ridgeline above. Hours passed until the canyon rose before them, black jaws opening into shadow. The air grew colder, the silence heavier. They slid into position, setting charges along the rocky walls, each click of metal echoing too loud in Elena's ears. Holt muttered as he worked. Feels too easy. Don't jinx it, Lewis whispered. But Holt wasn't wrong. Elena's skin prickled with unease. Easy wasn't Raman's style. Then, voices. Faint, growing louder. The rumble of engines. Headlights slicing through the dark. A convoy. Right on time. Positions, Elena hissed. The trucks rolled into the canyon, silhouettes of armed men riding in the backs. Crates stacked high, weapons gleaming under tops. Perfect. Elena's finger hovered over the detonator. One press, and the canyon would collapse, cutting Raman's artery in fire and stone. Her squad's work would echo across the region. But before she pressed, a voice cut the night. A child's voice. She froze. The convoy carried not just fighters, but civilians, families crammed into the last truck, wide-eyed children clutching blankets. Human shields. Holt swore under his breath. Son of a... Lewis's face went pale. If we blow it. Elena's hand shook. One choice, press and kill innocents, or hesitate and lose the strike, maybe lose her squad. Her enemy had forced her into an impossible box. Elena, Elijah's voice crackled softly in her calm but sharp. You can still take the shot. But you'll live with it. The trucks rolled deeper into the canyon. Seconds ticked. The window closed. Elena's chest heaved. She lowered the detonator. Hold. Not like this. The squad stared, stunned, but obeyed. The convoy passed through, engines fading into the night. Silence returned. Holt broke it first. You just let them go. I just saved children, Elena snapped, her voice raw. We'll find another way. But inside, doubt gnawed. She'd spared innocents, yes, but she'd also spared Raman's lifeline. And she knew, with bone-deep certainty, that mercy would have consequences. As the squad exfiltrated, Elijah's voice came again, softer this time. You chose humanity over victory. Noble. Dangerous. Raman will answer that mercy with blood. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. Because she already knew he was right. The desert night pressed heavy on their shoulders as Elena's squad pulled back from the canyon. No one spoke for the first mile. Their boots crunched over loose stone, rifles hanging at the ready, the silence loud enough to choke. She felt Holt's eyes on her, burning with words he hadn't yet released. Lewis walked like a ghost, head down, as if carrying the weight of those children himself. And Elijah, steady on the ridgeline, said nothing, but his shadow stretched longer than the rest. When they finally reached the extraction point, The helicopter blades chewed the air into thunder. The squad climbed aboard, exhausted, tension thick enough to bite. Elena strapped in and forced herself to look each of them in the eye. "We'll find another way," she said over the roar. Holt barked a bitter laugh. "Another way?" We had him. One button, and Rahman's supply line was dust. Instead, we let him drive off smiling. Lewis flinched. "It wasn't smiling, Sergeant. There were kids. You saw them." "That's the point," Holt shot back. "He's using them against us. And it worked. Now he knows exactly how to tie our hands." Elena cut in, her tone sharp enough to sting. "Enough. We don't debate it in the bird. We made our choice. We live with it. End of discussion." The words silenced them, but they didn't ease the fracture. Holt turned away, staring out the window into the night. Lewis fiddled with the strap of his helmet, jaw clenched. And Elena sat still, her hands gripping her rifle, her heart pounding with doubt she couldn't show. Back at FOB Hammer, Wexler's face told the story before he spoke. His jaw was tight, his eyes stormy. "You had him," the colonel growled, slamming a fist onto the map table. "Do you understand what this means, Captain? Every crate that passed through that canyon tonight will become bullets in our soldiers. Bombs in our convoys. Dead men in our coffins." Elena stood stiff, refusing to flinch. "With respect, sir, there were civilians. Children. Blowing the canyon would have slaughtered them alongside the enemy." Wexler leaned forward, voice dropping to a deadly quiet. "This isn't a charity mission. This is war. Every soft choice makes tomorrow harder." The room went silent. Holt's lips pressed tight, as if holding back an "I told you so." Lewis shifted uncomfortably. Elijah, leaning against the wall, watched with unreadable eyes. Elena forced herself to answer. "We'll adapt. We'll find a cleaner strike. Rahman won't stay untouchable forever." Wexler studied her, then finally leaned back, sighing. "For your sake, Captain, I hope you're right. Because I guarantee Rahman's already planning his answer." He was. It came 3 days later. The morning sun bled over the horizon when the first mortar landed inside FOB Hammer. The ground shook, dirt spraying into the sky. Sirens wailed, men scrambled for cover. A second shell whistled in, smashing into the motor pool and turning trucks into fireballs. "Incoming! Take cover!" Voices roared through the chaos. Elena was already sprinting toward the blast site, Holt and Lewis at her side. The smell of burning fuel choked the air. Soldiers dragged wounded comrades through the smoke, screaming for medics. The base was under siege. She grabbed her radio. "Ops, this is Ramirez. Report, where the hell is this fire coming from?" A frantic voice answered, "Spotters say the ridge east of us, enemy mortars dug in. They're hammering us hard." The next shell slammed into the barracks. The roof blew open, debris raining down. Elena's chest twisted. Her squad's bunks were in that building. Jenkins. She ran before she could think, tearing through dust and fire. Inside the shattered barracks, chaos reigned. Jenkins was half buried under a collapsed beam, blood streaking his face. "Jenkins!" she shouted, throwing herself down beside him. His eyes fluttered open. "Oh. Don't you dare quit on me," she growled, straining with Holt to lift the beam. Muscles screamed, sweat burned, but together they freed him, dragging him clear as another mortar hit nearby. Outside, Elijah's rifle cracked sharp and clean. He'd climbed onto the sandbags, calm amid the storm, picking off advancing fighters who'd slipped close under the mortar cover. Each shot was precise, buying them seconds at a time. Elena barked orders, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Holt, Lewis, get Jenkins to the med tent. Elijah, keep eyes high. I'm taking a team east, those mortars don't stop, this base won't last." She rallied 6 soldiers, pushing them toward the ridge under withering fire. Bullets kicked dirt at their heels, explosions tore the ground. She felt the weight of every life on her shoulders, but there was no room for hesitation now. The climb up the ridge was hell. Mortars boomed overhead, smoke choking the sky. 2 men went down under sniper fire, their bodies tumbling back into the dust. Elena's throat burned with rage, but she kept climbing, teeth clenched, until the ridge line snapped into view. She saw them, 5 insurgents huddled around mortar tubes, reloading, laughing as they shelled the base below. Her rifle barked. 2 dropped instantly. Her soldiers stormed forward, bullets ripping through flesh and sand. The mortars fell silent, abandoned as the survivors scattered. Elena shot one in the back before he vanished into the rocks. Silence settled for the first time in an hour, broken only by the distant cries of the wounded below. She stood panting, chest heaving, staring down at the burning base. Smoke rose in thick pillars. Vehicles destroyed, buildings cratered, medics scrambling in every direction. Her heart twisted. She knew this wasn't just random retaliation. This was Raman's message. He knew she had hesitated. And now he was making her pay in blood. Back in the command center, Wexler's voice was steel. Over 20 dead. 40 wounded. Vehicles destroyed, fuel reserves gutted. Do you feel the weight of your mercy now, Captain? Elena stood rigid, fists trembling at her sides. She wanted to scream, to argue, to throw the colonel's blame back at him. But deep down, the guilt gnawed her raw. Holt's voice came later, in the quiet of the barracks. You saved kids in that convoy. But Raman doesn't play by those rules. He turned your mercy into a weapon. Now our men are in body bags. Lewis sat nearby, eyes hollow. There had to be another way. Elijah broke the silence, his tone calm but razor-sharp. War doesn't give you clean choices. Only bloodier consequences. What matters now is what you do with the pain. Elena stared at the floor, her reflection warped in a pool of water leaking from a busted pipe. Her chest burned with grief, anger, and something darker, resolve. I won't let him write this story, she whispered. Not Raman. Not anyone. Next time, we finish it. Elijah's gaze flickered with approval. Holt's expression was carved from stone. Lewis shifted, as if clinging to the hope her words promised. But deep inside, Elena knew Raman wasn't done. This was just his opening move. And the next strike wouldn't just target bases or convoys. It would target her heart. The night pressed down on them like a suffocating weight, and silence was more dangerous than gunfire. Aisha crouched against a half-collapsed wall, her rifle braced on the jagged edge of stone. Beside her, Captain Rourke adjusted the antenna on his comm unit, trying to pull a signal from the static. Across the rubble-strewn courtyard, Sanchez and Patel secured the flank, their eyes scanning the shadows for movement. They were deep in hostile territory, their extraction window shrinking, their mission incomplete. Anything? Aisha whispered, barely moving her lips. Dead air, Rourke muttered. Jamming still up. If we don't knock out that tower by dawn, our ride won't even know where to find us. Aisha's jaw tightened. Weeks of fighting had taught her that every decision was a knife's edge. One wrong move, and the whole team could vanish into the dust, another ghost in an endless war. But she wasn't the same soldier who'd arrived in this country months ago. She had carried wounded through fire, taken the shot when no one else could, and earned the SEALs' respect when she proved her courage in blood. Now she had to finish what they'd started. We push tonight, she said firmly. The longer we wait, the more chance they dig in around the tower. We need to cut the head off their network. Rourke studied her, his weathered face unreadable in the dim light. He wasn't one to hand out trust easily, but his silence wasn't disapproval, it was consideration. Finally, he nodded. All right. Your point. But if this goes sideways, we don't die heroes for a busted signal. Understood. Aisha gave a single nod. Understood. They moved like shadows through the ruins, every bootfall calculated, every breath measured. The air smelled of cordite and charred concrete, reminders of the airstrikes that had shattered the city months before. Aisha's senses were sharpened to a painful edge. She could hear the faint squeak of Sanchez adjusting his sling, the tiny click of Patel's teeth as he clenched down on nerves. She could even feel her own heartbeat in her fingertips. The tower loomed ahead, a rusted skeleton of steel braced against the moonlight. Its blinking red lights mocked them, pulsing like the beat of an enemy heart. But between them and that heart lay a gauntlet of guards, patrols moving in restless patterns through the debris. Aisha raised her fist, halting the team. Through her scope, she tracked two figures pacing by the tower's base, rifles slung but ready. They weren't disciplined soldiers, they shifted weight nervously, smoked between turns, but that didn't make them less dangerous. A sloppy enemy could still get lucky. She signaled silently, 2 down, quick. Patel and Sanchez nodded, sliding into position. On Aisha's count, 2 muffled pops echoed in the night, and the guards collapsed into the dirt before their cigarettes hit the ground. The team ghosted forward, dragging the bodies into shadow. Inside the base of the tower, the stench of oil and sweat hit them. A staircase spiraled upward into darkness. Rourke muttered, "Place'll be crawling with more." Aisha whispered back, "Then we move before they notice." Step by step, they ascended. Twice they froze as boots clanged above them, patrols crossing higher levels. Every second stretched like an eternity, but the patrols passed, and the team pressed on. On the third level, they found a room stacked with equipment, generators humming, wires snaking across the floor, screens flickering with enemy chatter. Aisha crouched by a console, scanning the crude setup. "This is it," she murmured. "Their whole comms net routes through here." Patel began planting charges with swift precision, his hands steady despite the sweat dripping from his forehead. Sanchez covered the door, while Rourke kept his rifle aimed at the stairwell. Aisha's job was clear: hold the line until the charges were set. Then came the sound she dreaded: boots, fast, too many of them. Shouts in a language she half understood. The enemy had noticed the missing patrol. "Contact incoming," Rourke hissed. The first soldier burst through the doorway, rifle raised. Aisha squeezed the trigger before he could shout, the shot muffled but final. Another came, then two more. The stairwell erupted into chaos as the enemy charged, firing wildly into the room. Bullets chewed through the walls, sparks leaping from machinery. Sanchez dropped one with a clean burst, Patel cursed as he shielded the detonator with his body, and Rourke barked orders like thunder. But it was Aisha who anchored them, her rifle speaking with surgical precision, each shot buying another second. She moved on instinct, not fear, every decision immediate and irreversible. Still, the enemy kept coming. 30 seconds. Patel shouted, fingers racing over wires. "Make it 20. Rourke snapped. Blood sprayed as Sanchez took a round to the shoulder, spinning him against the wall. He gritted his teeth, growling, "I'm still in it," even as Aisha dragged him to cover. She looked at Patel. "How long?" 15. It would be 10 too many. Without another word, Aisha grabbed a flashbang from her vest, yanked the pin, and hurled it into the stairwell. The explosion cracked like lightning, white light searing the darkness. Screams echoed as the enemy reeled, blinded and deafened. "Now," she roared. Patel slammed the final charge into place, thumbed the detonator, and nodded. They bolted from the room, half carrying Sanchez, sprinting down the stairwell as shouts and gunfire followed them. Rourke led them into the courtyard, diving for cover just as the charges blew. The explosion split the night apart. Fire roared upward, steel shrieked as it bent and shattered, and the tower collapsed in a storm of sparks and twisted metal. The ground shook beneath them, dust and debris raining like a storm. When the rumble faded, the blinking red lights were gone. Silence stretched, broken only by distant cries of panic. Rourke spat dirt from his mouth, eyes blazing as he looked at Aisha. That was one hell of a call. But before relief could settle, movement stirred in the shadows. Not stragglers, organized fighters, regrouping fast. Dozens of them, their silhouettes cutting through smoke. "Ambush," Sanchez groaned, clutching his bleeding shoulder. They had seconds to choose: stand and fight a hopeless battle, or gamble on a desperate escape. Aisha met Rourke's eyes. No words were needed. He gave the smallest nod, handing her the lead. She spotted an alley cutting east, narrow but promising cover. "That way," she shouted, hauling Sanchez to his feet. The team ran. Bullets sparked off walls, shouts chasing them, boots pounding in pursuit. Every turn was a decision, every corner a risk. Once, they nearly collided with a patrol, but Aisha shoved Sanchez behind a dumpster, dropped to one knee, and took two rapid shots that cleared their path. Her actions weren't just survival, they were trust made real, decisions that pulled her team through fire. After what felt like hours but could only have been minutes, they burst from the ruins into open desert. The tower's smoke trailed behind them like a signal flare. Somewhere out there, the extraction bird would be searching for that very sign. Patel raised the comm, static hissing. Then, faint but real, a voice broke through. "Raise it 2, we see your smoke. Hold position. 10 mics out." Aisha let out a shaky breath, but she didn't relax. 10 minutes could still mean death. They dug into a shallow ridge, weapons ready. The enemy wasn't far behind, their shouts carrying on the wind. Sanchez was pale, losing blood fast. Patel kept pressure on the wound, muttering prayers under his breath. Rourke checked his rifle, then looked at Aisha. "When they write this up, they're gonna say you saved our asses." She shook her head, eyes fixed on the horizon. "Not yet. We're not out." The first enemy figures crested the ridge, rifles flashing. The firefight erupted again, hot and furious, traces streaking the night. Aisha's arms burned with recoil, her ears rang with explosions, but she didn't falter. Not when Sanchez cried out in pain. Not when Patel's magazine ran dry. Not when Rourke's orders came sharp and fast through the chaos. Because she knew, this was who she was now. Not just a medic, not just a soldier, but both. The one who carried lives and took them, who bore the weight of choices that couldn't be undone. The thundering roar of rotors finally cut through the storm. A Black Hawk swept over the ridge, searchlight blazing, minigun spitting fire into the enemy ranks. Dust and wind hammered them as the bird dropped, door gunners shouting for them to move. Aisha grabbed Sanchez under one arm, Patel under the other, and hauled them through the maelstrom toward the open bay. Rourke covered their retreat, firing until his last round clicked empty, then dove aboard as the Black Hawk lifted. The ground fell away beneath them, the desert shrinking into darkness. Enemy fire streaked upward but fell short, lost against the power of the rising machine. Inside the halo, Sanchez slumped against the wall, pale but alive. Patel gripped his shoulder in relief. Rourke sat opposite Aisha, his face grim but proud. She leaned back against the vibrating metal, chest heaving, eyes burning from dust and exhaustion. For a moment, there was silence but for the chop of blades. Then Rourke said quietly, "You shifted roles tonight like I've never seen. From saving lives, to taking the shot. And because of that, we're all still breathing." The word sank into her like a brand. She didn't smile, didn't boast. She just nodded, because she understood. The cost of every life saved was another life taken. The desert stretched beneath them, endless and dark. They were going home, for now. But Aisha knew this wasn't the end. Wars didn't end clean, and decisions always left scars. As the Black Hawk disappeared into the night, the collapsed tower burned behind them, a beacon of victory, and a reminder that the fight was far from over. And though no one spoke it aloud, every man on that bird knew they would never forget what Aisha had done that night. The end.